Typhoon Haikui still strengthening near landfall in Taiwan on tonight's tropical weather bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical weather bulletin for September 3rd. Still quite an active tropics, but there are signs that it's winding down just a little bit, but we still have to get through a powerful typhoon landfall that we're expecting in the next 12 hours from Typhoon Haikui, which is still intensifying right now, unfortunately, and could reach Category 4 before it makes landfall. In the Atlantic though, we've got two storms that are still active and two remnants or extratropical cyclones that we're looking at, Gert and Katia. But what's next? Well, there could be two more systems on the horizon, a 60% chance over the central lower Atlantic and a 20% chance that will emerge off Africa later this coming week and could become a significant storm as well. In the Eastern Pacific, day 111 of hurricane season, we have a 90% chance of development for a system that's starting to show promise in the eastern part of the ocean, and that's likely to become a substantial system but will move out to sea. In the Western Pacific, Haikui of course is the main story right now. Saola is still a tropical depression and weakening and will be dying off very shortly over southern western China. But Haikui is the main area that we're watching right now, with it looking very powerful as it reels down the miles before landfall. Two other areas of interest, both with lower chances of development now, 20 and 30%, but we'll keep watching that because it is unpredictable and we could get a tropical storm from one of those systems. A close-up then of Haikui right now. We have a typhoon warning for most of Taiwan except Taipei, New Taipei, Keelung and Taoyuan. And a yellow typhoon warning in China for Ningde, and a blue typhoon warning for a few other areas. Gale advisories also in effect from Miyakojima and Yaeyama Islands of Japan. It is just 93 kilometers from Green Island, 130 from Taitung, which could be a landfall location, 214 from Kaohsiung City, 245 from Taichung City, and 277 from Taipei. Let's take a look at some satellite imagery of Haikui right now, and here's its progression in the last few hours. Microwave imagery, which we can't show you at the moment, but it does look stunning, and the satellite imagery looks like it might be catching up a little bit, an eye popping out, and that's why we've given it 115 miles per hour Category 3 status, and it looks like it's possibly rapidly intensifying, and if it does continue in this vein, it could get towards Category 4 status before it makes landfall, although there is still that possibility that land interaction from the mountains of Taiwan will get to the storm quickly, and that could start to weaken it before landfall, and we might be looking not at a Category 4. Here it is on radar though right now, looking very impressive as well, although it remains to be seen whether we might have a fully constructed eye wall or whether there might be a change occurring there. There's Idalia, the remnants of now extratropical. National Hurricane Center have ceased their advisories, and that rain just about moving away from Bermuda now. They don't expect regeneration, and the warnings have been lifted in Bermuda. This was Katia, looks terrible on this imagery as a matter of fact. We're still keeping tropical storm for continuity, but I'm not sure what's going to happen at the next advisory there. There's Saola, not too far from the Vietnam border now, and really losing its rotation. I expect that will be post-tropical next advisory. And this is Gert, actually, still with a big bank of convection on that southern side. And this is Kirogi, which we probably won't mention again tonight. Tropical depression still at this point, but has weakened. Sea surface temperatures in the Eastern Pacific are looking good, 30 degrees over a few areas off the coast of Mexico primarily. Ahead of that tropical system that is probably developing, those temperatures are looking very warm. Gulf of Mexico still very warm, but a slight cool pool there from Idalia's track, and the Atlantic proper, you can see a big area now west of Bermuda that's cooled down quite a lot thanks to the recent storms. But still very warm SSTs pushing 32 degrees over the Bahamas, southern Cuba, Jamaica and the Gulf. Western Pacific also looking pretty hot still, except for a few areas further north, but in the main areas there still very warm, 30 degrees plus, and in the South China Sea maybe a little bit more than that. That's the hot spot of the Western Pacific right now. For Haikui, those temperatures around 30 degrees until landfall. Bay of Bengal is bouncing back. It was around 28 degrees yesterday, and already it's hit back and it's around 30 degrees on this latest graphic. Arabian Sea also starting to get its mojo back. Southwest Indian Ocean, maybe a slight increase here as well off the northern coast of Madagascar, but in general it's still well into the off-season. And in the Australian region as well, a little pool of warmer water starting to build there north of Western Australia, but in general still pretty quiet. And a little bit of warmer water reaching the main island of Fiji as well in the South Pacific. Sea surface temperature anomalies look like this. We've got generally average conditions in the Western Pacific, but some hot spots in the South and East China Seas. Eastern Pacific is still that hot and cold combination, but more warm in the areas that matter. In the Eastern Pacific, around 2 to 3 degrees above average, and the El Nino becoming more pronounced. In the Atlantic, sea surface temperature still well above average in most areas, apart from that trail caused by Franklin. Temperatures in the main development region around 3 degrees above normal. Oceanic heat content looks like this, still very similar to what it's been looking like recently, maybe a little bit more now in the Gulf of Mexico and around the Bahamas. Eastern Pacific still holding on to a few good values there off the coast of Mexico, so good conditions still for more cyclones. Western Pacific still has that corridor extending across the whole region, but not as strong as it was in previous weeks. So let's check the GFS model then for the next 5 days. So you can see all the current systems there, and we're circling the formation points of 2 more that will appear near the end of this 5-day period. One tracks along the Atlantic there and forms as it gets closer to the eastern Caribbean islands, and the other one forming near the end of that 5-day period, not too far from Cape Verde, and could cause issues there. The other systems, the old guard now, all still dying off, except for Franklin, which could regenerate as it gets close to Iberia, would you believe? We'll look at that in a minute. In the Eastern Pacific, there's a very small system that forms out of this 90%, and all of a sudden it has a big transformation and becomes a much larger system as it properly starts to get going there. A general movement west-northwestward through that 5-day period, forming by the 4th, and then really getting going by the time we get to the 7th and becoming a hurricane. And in the Western Pacific, Haikui, not much uncertainty now as to the landfall. Looks like a powerful one on the way. And watching that other area of interest there that GFS is keen on to becoming a tropical storm, maybe even a typhoon briefly, as it moves through the Bonin Islands of Japan and just to the southeast of Tokyo. Watching Haikui once again, its continuous movement there slowly towards southern China, and actually following a similar track to Saola at some points there, passing very close to Hong Kong, what's left of it. And what happens there is still traceable just at the end there in the South China Sea. Well, let's take a look at rainfall projections in the next 7 days, areas to watch out for. Of course, we're expecting massive amounts on the mountains of Taiwan, could be in excess of 20 inches, that's 500 millimeters, over a large swathe of that coastline. Hualien I'm particularly thinking of for heavy rainfall there, and points south as well. So looking at those values, up to 23, 24 inches of rainfall, that's 600 millimeters, and on the over Kaohsiung City getting close to 8 inches there, 200 millimeters, and a few areas in southeastern China, Xiamen, Shantou, probably getting to around a similar amount. Even in the Philippines, monsoonal rains are enhanced once again along that western coast of Luzon, getting up to 10 inches, 250 millimeters, and still maybe 8 inches of further rainfall from Saola in the far south of China, moving towards the Vietnam border, around 200 millimeters expected. So watch the Atlantic, look up there, that's Franklin, what's left of it, possibly having a second wind, and boy does it, look at it, passing very close to Portugal and Spain, and eventually limping over to Morocco, probably as a post-tropical cyclone by then, but only just, goodness me. And then these two systems in the southern Atlantic, the main region, a tropical storm through the Lesser and Greater Antilles, and it gets blocked really and killed off by Hispaniola, and that second system becoming a hurricane out to sea. Now we're looking at this Eastern Pacific system, which really gathers pace and becomes a major hurricane by the looks of things there. A gradual movement a little bit further towards the northwest before the end of that 10-day period, and there it is, starting to die off by the time we get to day 10. Watching that loop again, nothing else forming there in the Eastern Pacific. You can also spot the Gulf there on the right hand side, there's nothing there either during that period. So let's take a look now at the Western Pacific. What are we expecting here? Well, Haikui does redevelop in the South China Sea. There it is, going in for round 2 and becomes a typhoon again after dying off initially for Hainan Island and then into northern Vietnam as a tropical storm. So Haikui could be on for a second life there as well. Another system there just off the southern coast of Japan possibly, although it's very sketchy and I would say not to trust that at this moment. That's all the serious stuff done. You can take a look at the Force 13 merch store by scanning that barcode on the top right or going to store at force13.com and take a look at our usual items as well as our full season and individual storm animations, and are still waiting for Hone t-shirts. Never gets old. Silly range then, we're still looking at that hurricane in the Atlantic. No trace of that first one, it got killed off completely by the Greater Antilles, and there it is, that Atlantic hurricane, not affecting any land areas. That's how we like to see it. Probably a category 3 peak there if I wasn't mistaken, and doing a little bit of meandering there in the northern reaches, but loses its strength as it does so. Still active at the end of that 16-day period, but the good news is nothing else in the Atlantic in that long range period, and also that the models have so far dropped on that first system, which at one point was looking like it could have been a significant hurricane threat to the Lesser Antilles. Still can't rule that out though, keep watching. Western Pacific, there's another system forming in the South China Sea later on, and maybe another one there up towards Japan that blows up east of Korea, interestingly. Warm waters there right now, but will it be warm enough to sustain a tropical cyclone way up there? I'm not sure. Watch that again, you'll see both of these systems. That South China Sea one, quite large, gets the typhoon strength, could be heading towards southern China there, and maybe another system forming in the Far East as well, getting towards the Mariana Islands at the end. Well, Force 13's Eastern Tour officially commences on Tuesday and will be in Athens, Singapore, Cebu and Hong Kong. If you want to meet and greet or tag along with us for some of our journey, feel free to send us a message or contact at force13.com or through social media. You can also chat to us on Discord and with other weather watchers around the world. Discord.gg/force13. Over 3,700 now joining our community. Well, on this day, same naming list, but a completely different year in the Atlantic. It was Tropical Storm Lee, which was extremely large and underrated because of its lack of strength. It caused a lot of widespread flooding in the southern United States and would shortly become a subtropical storm, unusually for the Gulf of Mexico. We had Hurricane Katia, which was starting to strengthen. Category 1 would end up being a Category 4 at peak. And in the Western Pacific, we had Tropical Storm Noru and Talas on its way out through the Japanese islands. I think it was just passing Shikoku at this point. And that was 2 months before Force 13 launched. Back to today though, and the next name in the Atlantic now is Lee. In the Eastern Pacific it's still Hova, and in the Central Pacific it's Hone. Imagine if those two are active at the same time. 52 storms so far this year. We're starting to climb towards that annual average. In the Western Pacific, our next name is Yun Yung. In the North Indian Ocean, it will be Tej. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, the first name of the upcoming season is Alvaro. The Australian season's next name has just slipped my mind, and there it is, it's Jasper. And in the South Pacific, it's Lola. This is my final tropical weather bulletin before my big break. I'll be back with you for another tropical weather bulletin on September 22nd.